Now joined by Jackson Ajello, Super Bowl Newhouse alum back in 2019. Jackson, thanks for taking some time.
No problem. Nice to honestly hear that it's become an alum thing that it keeps going. It's really cool.
Yeah, we're really excited to get out to Vegas next week, recording this on Friday, February 2nd. So going back to when you, Jonah, and Drew went to, what was it, Atlanta back in 2019, I guess just initial memories of the lead up to getting down to Atlanta and then what the week was like.
The lead up was honestly pretty fun, like just thinking about all the different things we could do. And since then it's been great to see even more planning, honestly, kind of go into it for all the classes to go since. Cause for us, just kind of headed down there as the guinea pigs. The real idea was just like, hey, wouldn't it be kind of cool if we went down to Radio Row? And then we happened to, connect with Jonah and Professor Denninger, who kind of set things up, and he was hugely helpful throughout the whole process. Obviously, he teaches the Super Bowl class at Syracuse. So all of that was super helpful. And then, honestly, I think once we got down there, we were just kind of like, what can we do? And, everyone is so helpful. Like, I can't say that enough. Like, you think about Radio Row and you kind of just assume, in a sports business that it's a super competitive field. Everybody's kind of like cutthroat after each other. And like, yes, obviously there are aspects of that, but once we were down there, everyone couldn't have been more helpful. Like, we got down there, we ran into some tech issues all of a sudden, like another Syracuse grad happened to help us out all of a sudden. And we got set up with a bunch of other stuff that, we almost ran into some issues where we weren't going to be on the air.
It's interesting because we got a group of six going this year, and you guys had just the three of you. So when you're doing all these different things, was there, moments where you had to go out on your own and do things? What was, kind of, I guess, the content process like for you guys with such a small group?
Yeah, we went down with the plan of like, obviously, we're going to do a radio show from Radio Row. That was like step one of the process, right? Because I was doing the sports talk directing at AER. Drew was kind of on the play-by-play representative, and Jonah was kind of representing Citrus TV. So we kind of had like the different angles, even though we all worked at all those places. That was kind of just like how we delineated it. So as we head down there, at certain points in time, we had to wander off and kind of separate as a group. And there might be one person doing Radio Row, which, we would record some interviews ahead of time just to get that done, because we had the opportunity to do a bunch of cool stuff. We got to go tour the stadium beforehand. We got to go see ESPN set up with Seth Markman, who was super kind with his time. We got to essentially really be a part of that Radio Row experience and go interview a bunch of different people and, kind of do the whole car wash thing where we just wandered around, seeing somebody who looked like an agent, walked up, introduced ourselves, was like, hey, like, you got time to come on this like Syracuse University thing? Like, we're students, like we always led with the students thing. We're like, hey, we're just innocent students, help us. And, people were very generous.
So if you think back to then, was there any, interviews or like you just walk up to is there someone you were like, oh, I really want to go talk to that person, but I need to like work up the courage to like go, hi, I'm Jackson. I'm a student at Syracuse. Will you come on our radio show? Is there like a big name that you guys were like, oh, this is kind of our white whale that we want to get on the radio show?
I think some of those white whales that we would have liked to do that with were properly guarded by about 30 people at a time. Like, we walked by Kevin Hart and we're like, hey, Kevin. And then, people come around out of nowhere and like, you're not getting over to Kevin Hart. But we got a bunch of different NFL players to come on. We had Akbar, who does the Ninja Warrior stuff. Vernon Davis, or not Vernon Davis, rather. David Njoku came on. Eric Decker. And a lot of those guys, it was kind of really good practice for us for, what you eventually kind of do out in the real world, which is, yeah, you just go up to somebody, introduce yourself, say like, hey, this is what I am, this is what I'm doing. And, especially the student thing helps. The student thing helps a lot more than, working out in the field where if you're trying to get something, because everybody assumes you're trying to get something. But when you're just a student, everybody's a lot more kind with their time. So they were very, very, very generous with being like, all right, yeah, well, sure, we'll help out. Yeah, you want us? Come on, we'll come on after that person right over here, right next to you. And some of the people around us, next to us, like from different areas, radio shows, were very kind about being like, hey, we got so-and-so coming on. I think they have a block right after. You want to come on? Or like, here's their agent's number. So a lot of that was super helpful. And, also anybody who was a broadcaster was very willing to come on and help out. Like Kevin Harlan came on, Scott Hansen came by, like all those dudes. Obviously, Scott's a Cuse guy. Any of the Cuse guys were, the Newhouse Mafia thing is I had never really encountered how real it was. Like obviously, people had helped me out along the way while I was at Syracuse, but that was the first time where I really realized how hugely helpful it is, like out in the field.
How many other Syracuse guys did you end up running into where you're like, oh yeah, this is a real thing in the wild?
The reason that it's so memorable is because I can't give you a number because it was that many. Like it was just at every turn, somebody from Syracuse was helping us out, like just left and right every single time. Like right at the beginning, we got to there and we didn't realize, which, something I'm sure that you guys don't have to have this problem, but we got down there and we realized that it's actually a separate fee to get to Radio Row and then to get yourself hooked up with Ethernet cables, get yourself hooked up to the Wi-Fi and everything down there to be able to actually broadcast from Radio Row. So we asked about that, and the number was a bit larger than what we had in the budget. So we were like, oh, we're not getting over the air. So we happened to then run into one of the head guys over at Westwood One, another Syracuse alum who helped us out and made like 2 phone calls. He's like, "Don't worry, guys, I got you." And then all of a sudden we were hooked up, and that was hugely helpful. And that was literally within seconds of being there, which was like hugely helpful. Again, we would not have been able to do anything right from the jump, which would have been a tough. Like we still would have been able to do some other things, but the whole purpose of us being there would have been gone about being on Radio Row. Would have made things way more complicated. Like we still would have had the opening night and whatnot, which is super cool, total circus. Like there was definitely a lot going on that night. Because I remember that was the night like Dave Portnoy got kicked out of that one because we were the Rams Patriots Super Bowl. And so he was there doing stuff for Barstool. And that's the one we saw him getting like escorted out, and we didn't really realize who it was at the time. And then we were watching Guillermo go around like he does for Jimmy Kimmel's show and do his interviews. And I can confirm that he actually does get tanked to do those. Like it's not just like a bit he's doing on the show. Like, no, he's just like really drunk. And if he asks a question where he doesn't know something about one of the guys, he genuinely does not know. Like he does not know anything about the people he's going to go interview. I went over to him because obviously he's awesome. And I was like, hey, could we do a little something? He's like, I don't have time for that, but like I can do a picture. So we took a picture. That was cool. But he was also getting prepped by his multiple assistants of like, all right, you're going to go ask Gronk this question. And he's like, which one's Gronk? And he's like, do I have to ask him a question? And he's like, they just gave him one of his flasks. He took a swig and he took our picture, and then off he went. And it was just like a wind-up toy they were sending out into the wild. He was awesome.
That's an awesome story. You mentioned Rams Patriots. We're lucky enough to get to cover a Patrick Mahomes Super Bowl. You were covering the last Tom Brady Patriots Super Bowl. What was covering, a Tom Brady Bill Belichick Patriots Super Bowl like, arguably the greatest head coach quarterback combo in the history of the NFL and all the buzz surrounding that?
That just automatically adds in a certain amount of buzz, which, for us getting to be down there at the Super Bowl the first time made it feel even that more cool, right? Obviously, no matter what, Super Bowl is going to be awesome, right? But if you show up there and it's first time quarterback, maybe not the most high profile franchises, yeah, it wouldn't maybe have felt as special as it did. But yeah, being there for a Tom Brady Super Bowl it definitely adds to the circus. Like you can feel that. And, partially, obviously, we were the last one before COVID. So I know some things have slightly changed since then, but it was an utter circus for sure. Like everything going around, especially that opening night as we were going around, because that was where we really had to like step into high gear of like, all right, go. And that's where, you kind of had to go find, we each had our own like ideas of things we wanted to do. Drew wanted to do something with Matthew Slater, who was like the coin flip guy for the Patriots, like expert. So we wanted to have him flip a coin and guess it a couple different times, like super fun idea. Jonah was doing like a longer piece that he wanted to do of like asking a bunch of different players some goofy questions. I just wanted to talk to Johnny Hecker because he's the Rams punter, and his whole thing was punters are people too. So I did like a thing with him of like, how good of a person are you? And asked him just like some random boring questions that I thought were funny. So yeah, that was super fun. Definitely gives you like a glimpse of like what it's like out there of, hey, you're actually going to go do what you want to do. So it's like, we all come to Syracuse to go do these types of things. That's where we want to go be out in the field. We want to go travel. Like some of the lessons I learned from there, I still apply. Like from going to that Super Bowl, like I still apply that now. Like I was at the NBA in-season tournament, and some of those things about like just going up to people, and like that's really where I gained a lot more of that confidence, honestly. Like yes, there was some elements of practice of having that at Newhouse, but to do that where you have to, even if you don't feel like you belong, sort of make yourself feel like you belong and sort of project that confidence, even if you're not that confident inside, was hugely helpful. And I think, I still use that now, even if I'm wandering around and I don't know somebody, but I know they know me from a certain show, just having that confidence to go up, be like, hey, you know me from so-and-so, or like, you know me from this. And being able to have that confidence for those introductions was honestly a hugely important thing we learned from there.
That's a great lesson. And I think some you probably wouldn't be the only person to say that's been on a trip like this. You mentioned opening night, you mentioned touring the stadium. Feels like, recently what Atlanta Stadium was relatively new at that point. That was the first stadium in the new Mercedes-Benz Stadium. They just had the Super Bowl in LA a couple years ago, brand new stadium. This year in Vegas, a new football stadium. What were some of the other experiences you guys got to do outside of Radio Row in terms of exploring Atlanta? You mentioned the stadium, but anything else besides that, like the Super Bowl experience, something along those lines?
Yeah, we went to the Super Bowl experience. We all ran some mock 40-yard dashes and did the three cone drill. I don't think any of us are proud of any of those videos, if we're being completely honest. I'm sure that's the truth. The other thing, the media party is awesome. Like totally one of the coolest things I've ever been to. Like we're wandering around and like obviously it's with, for any of us who are like, we're more sports media junkies than the average person, right? Like I'm sure a lot of people would find those people cool, but like for people who are Syracuse kids who love people in sports media and are looking up to a lot of these people and trying to emulate them, they are all there. So you're there with all the people you've grown up watching, as like Wolfgang Puck was like serving food, and I don't know where the one will be in Vegas, but ours was at the Georgia Aquarium, and the Georgia Aquarium is sick. So we're just wandering around. It's like Wolfgang Puck's feeding food, free drinks, which is great if you are over 21 as a member of the media. And also, there's just like a huge whale shark floating around because it's an aquarium, and they had a bunch of like games off to the side and whatnot. It was like totally, totally cool, and we were having a total blast. Like I don't think Drew, Joan, or I ever wanted to leave that party.
That's awesome. One last thing for you. If there was a funniest or most memorable interview that you guys did on the trip, I guess it would have been Guillermo if he had agreed to do the interview. If there was one radio or video interview you guys did that has stuck with you over the course of these 5 years, what would it be?
I think it would probably be I guess for maybe more for me than for anyone else, interviewing the Golics, because we had Golic and his mom, Golic Jr., I should say. And Golic Sr. came over and said hello, but we were interviewing Golic Jr. and his mom. But just for me, because then like literally 6 months later, we were in the office together every day. So that was kind of funny for me, of being like, hey, remember when we like talked for a while? You were talking about like his mom was promoting like they had a new helmet technology to protect against concussions. But I think joking around and talking with him and then circling back months later with some of those dudes who then were immediately my coworkers, because like all the people who were there, like not their handlers, but their producers who were kind of like helping to shepherd them around, were all dudes who then I was working with months later. Like I was like, oh hey guys, like I didn't know you guys worked
Are
here.
you the guy from you're the guy from the Super Bowl? That was you?
Like, do you remember some like annoying Syracuse students who like were trying to like get your host to do some stuff? Like, here I am, I'm back.
That's awesome. Can't thank you enough, Jackson. Mention your, Newhouse alum, went to the Super Bowl, but where are you now? Where has life taken you, post Syracuse?
I'm currently a podcast producer here at ESPN. I work on the Hoop Collective and Fantasy Focus and First Draft. So I guess I get to touch some, different varieties of the ESPN talent. Hopefully not in a weird way, but yeah, no, it's fun over at ESPN. I like it.
That's awesome. Can't thank you enough. And thanks for sharing some stories, some memories, some advice and guidance as we head into Super Bowl week.
No problem.